Okay, this is going to be a quick deck tech test for Hazezon. Um, Basically, this deck is built more around the Crucible Worlds type of effect on him, where you can play deserts from the graveyard, but we use a little bit of the token production. We just don't lean into the token production. These are the deserts we're playing. We're playing the cycle that taps for colorless, that taps for colored mana, and the cycling is obviously great with the Crucible Worlds ability. Then we have this Painland cycle, which is another source of colored mana, and each of these also a sack outlet for all of our other deserts, which is nice. Then we have these 8 different colorless ones that are medium to okay, but we just want to sort of critical mass of deserts in the deck, so that's why they're in here. Nothing really of note here, and then let's move on to how we get our deserts. So these are different ways that we can sort of tutor up our lands. Robinson Chart is fantastic because it gets 4. If we get 4 deserts, then no matter if they go into our hand or into the yard, we can still play them, so it doesn't matter which ones the opponent chooses. Shevet Monitor is great because it gets land into play untapped, and it can get basics or a desert. Then we just have tutoring a land into play by sacrificing land, which is, again, sack outlets for our lands is fantastic. Nylea's Intervention can get non-basic lands, so this can get our deserts or whatever. And then we have Expedition Map. Hour of Promise gets 2 lands and also has the synergy of making 2 zombies if we have 3 or more deserts. Then Escape Shift and Crop Rotation are sort of pretty common in these sort of land strategies. To go with that, we do have Field of the Dead to sort of take advantage of Escape Shift. So if we get a bunch of things, including Field of the Dead, then not only do we get a bunch of tokens off of the deserts entering, but then we also get a bunch of zombies from all those lands entering. We also have Vesuva and Thespian Stage to be additional copies of Field of the Dead. And then moving on, getting our lands into play. These are all of our different effects that allow us to play extra lands in a turn. The one sort of different one is Burgeoning, which is not playing extra lands on your turn. It's when your opponents play lands. And the sort of thought process is we're going to be playing lands from our graveyard generally on our turn, so we might build up lands in hand that then Burgeoning can help get into play. Another little thing to note is Mina and Din also allows us to return lands to our hand for an effect that will come into play with both the cycle lands to sort of get more value out of them, but then also for things like the Balaged Recovery allows you to sort of get this back and sort of bounce it to your hand and play it again. Sack outlets. Living Twister is not actually a sack outlet, but it can bounce lands to our hand, and then we can discard the lands to do damage to things. The rest of these are all sack outlets. These 3 being free sack outlets, so you can sack a bunch of lands and then do a sort of bring back a bunch of lands at once if you have an ability that does that. Nahiri's Lithoforming is a interesting card that is, I thought was just bad, but in this deck is actually pretty sweet because you can just sack, if you have X equal to the number of deserts you have in play or total deserts that you have in play and or graveyard, then you'll draw that many cards, you'll get that many lands right back because you can play them from the yard, and then you also get a ton of tokens from Hazezon. And then Hammer of Proforos is sweet because it's the first bit of text is usually what people play this card for. You control have a haste, but then it has an additional sack outlet for your lands. And I just wanted to go to the mass bring back lands. We have Splendid Reclamation, which is a sorcery that brings all your lands into play tapped. World Shaper brings all your lands into play from the graveyard tapped when it dies. And then Mini of Dominaria, the final chapter, brings all your lands from the graveyard back into play. So if you have one of these sack outlets, you can sack a bunch of stuff and before one of those effects goes off. We have some other recursion. Ancient Green Warden just has a built-in Crucible Worlds effect for any lands, and then also doubles up all of our landfall triggers, which is the main reason that we're playing it. And then this is just an additional land into play each time it attacks. Sun Titan is fantastic in this deck. Not only can it get our lands, but also most of our key pieces all cost 3 or less, including the commander. So Sun Titan does a lot of work in this. Sower, just another way to get back lands and also produce extra tokens when we sack lands. Balagad Recovery, talked about before, just a regrowth that is also a land and has synergy there. And then this Reclamation is very similar to Sun Titan in that it gets things that are 3 or less, and then it can also be flashback to do double that. Moving down here, we have 2 Planeswalkers. Nissa Vital Force is sweet because you can envelope quickly to get that landfall draw card emblem. And then Run of the 7 is just a good synergy for getting lots of lands into play and doing land synergy stuff. We have Titania, who's sort of in between a couple of different categories here because it has the recursion on ETB, but also as we sack lands, we get more tokens. And so that brings us over to our win cons. So these win cons I have separated into 2 sections. One is win cons that are powerful when we already have a bunch of tokens, and then we have win cons that are better when we are creating tokens gradually. So each of these we sort of want to play once we already have a board, and then they are very powerful. We have Felidar Retreat, 1/1 counters landfall, extra combats and power, +5/+5, a bunch of power, and then it gives all of our tokens +3/+3, and our commander as well. Perforos, just whenever we get a desert into play, we get 2 1/1 tokens, so it does 4 damage to each player whenever we play a desert, and then this is 2 damage to each opponent whenever we play a desert. Over here, some card advantage stuff. Mentor of the Meek, desert landfall, 2 tokens, gives us 2 triggers of this, and then we have giving all of our lands cycling, which is very useful. And then Skull Clamp is obviously fantastic with 1/1 token production. We have our boots. We have our removal spells that sort of hit anything. We have a couple of little tasty bits. We have Constant Mist, which is a fog that has a buyback for sack of land. Amulet of Vigor is great with any sort of lands things. And Cryptolith Rite is great for token production stuff, just getting extra mana from your tokens. We get some rampy stuff with Lotus Cobra and Tireless Provisioner. Essentially, landfall, get mana. With Provisioner, you can save it as treasure, so you don't have to use it right away. Simple mana rocks, Soul Ring, Arcane Signet, Chromatic Lantern, so that we are colorless tapping lands can tap for colored mana. And then up here is just our basic colored mana base, which we have lots of basic land types. We have 5 fetch lands. We have our Triome, a command tower, Yavimaya for our colorless lands to tap for mana, colored mana, and then Crowsland Verge is fantastic because it gets a forest and a plains, not just basic. So this can get 2 duels or a Triome and a duel when we crack it. That is the basic deck. It is pretty sweet. I had fun working on it. Looking forward to developing it further. Thanks for watching.